6.5 acres. 2 acres of that is meadow, which means it's about managing the meadow. 1 acre is a relatively young woodland with an orchard in the middle that the previous owners planted. The remaining acres are the ornamental garden and an allotment area. Kind of this lovely patchwork of stuff that the previous owners began. When we were looking, I was thinking it must be a blank canvas garden that we can transform, but actually when we came here, it completely changed my mind on that. Thinking I love the history of this place and the fact that previous owners have put so much love into it, and we could take what they've done to the next stage and make our own mark on it. Right, Monarda. This is Monarda didyma Panama, which I grew from seed. It's a really good seed mix, lots of different colours. So you grow them and you get every colour from light pink to white to crimson, purples, reds. And I thought this one looked quite nice today. And I love Monarda. I've always grown them in our garden. I think down in London, they struggled a little bit in the sandy soil, so some of them would start to get mildew. What I'm excited about here, because it is we have clay soil, which is really water retentive, and we do have more moisture. And I think these will do really well here, alongside plants like Astrantia. So I'm excited about growing these en masse. I think they look like, I don't know if you remember the 80s kids program called Fraggle Rock. Yes. They remind me of that. They just look like Fraggles, just like dancing around. And they also smell lovely when you brush the leaves. Kind of like sweet Earl Grey, that bergamot Earl Grey tea type smell. Yeah, so I love these, and they're so colourful. So I think I grew some from seed. I've got some cultivars as well, but I'm excited about the seed grown ones. They do seem really robust so far. Whether it's just because they're more vigorous from seed or not, I don't know.
Well, back to the subject of precipitation, which you have and we don't.
Yeah.
I was doing a guided tour of the garden for people the other day, and I did notice that in areas of the garden where I have been able to irrigate, our phlox are looking absolutely sick as a pig, really. And I just thought somehow or other, probably if we have more summers like this, and it rather seems as if we might, more of these periods of drought, we're going to have to rethink probably what we grow in the east of England. And I think we're going to have to go more to tap-rooted things like eryngiums, I guess, and stuff like that.
I was thinking exactly the same thing. My phlox has needed way too much maintenance, and I love it, but I don't know if it's going to be long for this world in my garden if the weather continues to be as it is, because it's just too high maintenance and too sad looking. It looks at me reproachfully on all those hot days. And I don't have any Monardas either. How obviously that you've grown them from seed and they seem to be wonderfully resilient. How quick are they from seed to flower, your Monardas?
Well, I found this Panama, it flowered in the first year. The plants were pretty good. Every single one flowered, which was good because it meant that you could whittle out the ones that you didn't want to keep and stop. And so it was really good for picking and choosing exactly what you wanted. But this year they've come back and they're huge plants, as if they've been growing there for years. So really, 2 years and they're really good border plants already.
How exciting. And obviously with all your acres, you must be looking for ways to grow from seed and divide and be able to propagate a lot of the material to fill your borders.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's all about, I think last year, I probably got about 100 key plants, but I only have one of each at the moment because I want to, over the years, let them bulk up, divide them and propagate. Because for me, that's the fun. The fun of the garden is propagating. I think you'll both know as gardeners, it's fun knowing that you've done that, and amazing when you stand back and go, that was a seed and now I've got 10 Monarda. That whole area. It's like, how did that happen? It's miraculous in a way. But also there's a lot of areas that bulking it out with stuff and looking for tough plants that will spread. I'm quite interested in this, planting in lots of tough plants and letting them just run riot and mishmash, which I might regret later. it might end up being a mistake, but I like that idea of that kind of wild approach. Just like, I won't plan the borders as such. I'll just let them the plants do what they want to do over time.
I love plants running riot. It's one of my favorite things.
Yes. Monardas, actually, it was one of the first ones I noticed in my Clapham garden in London. I planted a Cambridge Scarlet on one side of the border, and 3 years later it had moved itself to the other side. It just gradually gone across. I was like, what an amazing thing is. It doesn't care what I think, it's chosen its own home.
That's it. And then they just choose their own combinations. They're inevitably better than anything we planned, and nature rules.
Sometimes, not always. Sometimes
no.
nature's sometimes nature's what I want.
Not if it's masses of bindweed climbing over everything.
Oh, you're talking about bindweed king here. We've got lots of that.
Yeah. That's the one thing. So because my garden was new, it didn't come with lots of weeds. I've introduced most of them. They've come in with various plants I've bought or brought in from my mum's garden. And bindweed is one of the only ones I don't have. I'm sure it'll turn up in the next few months, but in the first 3 years, it hasn't arrived yet. So I'm just waiting.
I was wondering, with the climate getting drier in the summers, I wondered if with your gardens, are you really thinking about changing your plants? Have you got to the point where one garden you're watering so much, you're thinking, I don't want to do that bit anymore. Should we rethink this area? Is that on your minds at the moment?
Yeah, it is in actual fact. I mean, we are thinking in terms of being, we're going for plants like agapanthus, for instance. I mean, they've got very questing rootstocks. And you just mentioned, Jack, about letting plants do what they want to do. Well, we put agapanthus in the desert and they have become a weed because, gravel mulch everywhere and seeds in the gravel mulch, ideal nursery spot, and they just keep germinating. But yes, when you have a changing climate, this happens because, when we first came to East Ruston, which we bought East Ruston 50 years ago next year, which seems amazing to me because I still feel 23, but there we are, never mind. But I wouldn't have dared plant a pittosporum outside. Well, today they are in the garden and they're self-seeding, as are agapanthus, as are eucalyptus. Trachycarpus fortunei, the choosing palm, everywhere, all along the hedge bottoms. Obviously, the birds have eaten the fruit and, sitting on the top of the hedge, and down comes the seed and you've got a new plant. It's amazing.
It is amazing. I find this topic absolutely fascinating because in my first bit wild about weeds, I just warned in there that actually, as the climate changes, a plant like fennel will become a weed.
Yeah.
And it will down in the southeast of England. It already is, and it kind of. I think as gardeners, we have to be careful and aware of which plants are starting to do that, and make sure they don't get out into the wild where they could create a problem.
Yeah.
I think, luckily, we're much more aware now, and I don't think things like Japanese knotweed in today's world that wouldn't have happened because we're aware of what can happen.
Yeah.
But I think just keeping an eye on these plants like verbena and fennel down in our London garden, my London allotment, even up here, actually, they self-seed prolifically. And you can start to see them along roadsides and things. We just have to be aware of what.
How far are you from Norfolk then, Jack? Because, I mean, you're saying verbena is self-sowing with you. Well, I mean, it's been self-sowing here for about the last 15 years. And I suspect less long with you. I don't know, because you're colder than us.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I was when I came up. Was I surprised? Maybe I was a little bit surprised that the plants survive winter. As such, certain things surprised me. But yes, they're self-sowing around. Our families have been in Yorkshire, so I've known Yorkshire. I know Yorkshire very well.
Yeah,
we've only been here for a year and a half. But they're certainly sowing around. So how far are we? Probably 200 miles northwest from you, I think, about that. And it is very wet, but actually things like dahlias survive outside in winter without any mulching or anything as well.
Yeah.
And we certainly, as much as I'm talking about it raining, we certainly haven't escaped the changing climate. It was during the heat wave. I was standing on a client's woodland garden on a hillside, and the wind coming in was like a hairdryer.
Yeah.
On that hottest day. We were in drought, or a bit of drought at that point, so plants are starting to suffer. We did have to water a bit then. So it's interesting how much the climate is changing even all the way up here, where I thought we'd escaped for the rest of my life, but I don't think I have. I have to go to Scotland.
Well, it'll be watch this space. I mean, East Ruston Old Vicarage is always evolving anyway, but it'll be certainly interesting to see how the planting changes.
I loved hearing about the tap-rooted plants, and that kind of thinking is very clever and cool. It's kind of I think that is the way to go, exploring which plants can survive. We still have that challenge that our climate is sort of in the middle of changing, and we still have the cold snaps and the wet in winter. But anyway, that's part of gardening. It's about experimenting.
Another weird thing that happened here over the last winter was the fact that on the south front of our house, which is the hottest probably part of the garden really, I planted a tree dahlia that came from Creek Farm. And it roared up to 12 feet tall, completely out of scale, and makes everybody go, wow, what on earth's that? Is it a dahlia? No, it can't be a dahlia. But that dahlia didn't flower because the summer's not long enough for it. but it kept its old stems, 2/3 of its old stems, through the winter, and they shot. And every little shoot produced bunches of flowers. So we had a dahlia flowering on the front of the house in April. Amazing.
That is amazing. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
And we had a similar thing in London with Ricinus.
Yeah.
They were perennial. They
Really?
they were perennial in our garden. So I had to keep cutting them down, otherwise they would turn into these large shrubs. But I did start leaving them. They would just grow back in. The leaves would die back, but the stems would be fine, and they'd continue growing.
Now that's interesting, because a friend of mine actually last year, he kept Ricinus growing in a pot in a heated greenhouse, but he defoliated it completely. And in the spring, it produced all these new little side shoots. And he said, I think this is a way to keep them going, because you're going to get a much bigger, bushier plant, and it would be interesting to do this. And it's on my list to do. I've got a particularly rare form with blue stems and blue leaves, which I managed to get 3 plants of from Steve Edney down in Kent. And it's just flowering in the greenhouse now. And I'm going to obviously try and save my seed, but I want to save the plants as well.
I'll be interested to see what happens. I'd love to go to, maybe next time I come, we'll have this large shrub and we can come to it. You know, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
If anyone can do it, you can, Alan.
So where next with your show and tell, Jack?
Well, okay, let's go to the weeds. So this is shall I go controversial?
Yes, always.
This isn't the best specimen, because I actually cut this back last week. So this is ragwort, or also known as apparently Stinking Willy. I'm not sure where that name came from. But it's ragwort.
I think you added that in just because it's talking dirty, and Alan Gray would love it.
It is.
I've got a very silly schoolboy sense of humour, I'm afraid.
Just in case anyone didn't hear it, I said Stinking Willy. I'm not sure where that name came from, because I've never actually smelt it before, but it smells quite floral. Jacobaea vulgaris. This is a weed that is known for, people are worried about it poisoning livestock and horses, and it can do if they eat a lot of it. But when it's growing, and you see this in fields all the time, the animals, when it's alive, they just avoid it.
It's mostly in hay, it's the problem, isn't it? Because they don't taste it so much in hay. Yeah. Absolutely.
So there's a problem. So you don't want to have lots of it in hay, because when it's dry, they don't know what it is. But I wanted to just say what a beautiful plant this can be. I know this one looks a bit scraggly, because I have to say we had one on our land and I needed to control it just to make sure it doesn't spread too much. I cut this down 2 weeks ago, but that was cut 2 weeks ago, and it's still. This is how indestructible it is. And so when you have drought and you look at a field and it's brown.
And it's helped by the rain, of course.
Yeah, maybe it's been so wet here, it's just like being in a vase. But I was like, this ragwort and achillea are 2 wildflowers I've noticed that even in the longest drought still look green and flower in meadows. They're incredible. They're really good for wildlife. So 200 insects or species of insects or more rely on this plant. Some in particular can only survive with this plant. But what I love about it, it's got these really sturdy stems, really good vertical, and then it splays out into this large flat dome of bright yellow. And if it didn't have such a bad reputation, I think in gardens it would be. I'd love to grow it in alongside certain plants just for its structure. So it's that really rigid, narrow stem, and then this lovely splay top of flowers at the top, and it flowers all summer long. A really lovely shot of bright yellow.
You know, Jack, there's 2 things about that. First of all, the gardening public have a prejudice against yellow, which I'm very anti. And I'm going to do a yellow border here just to spite everybody. And the other thing is that I think that this ragwort is, I've watched you handling it, fondling it, looking at it, talking about it. But it is, in actual fact, probably a contender for one of those plants. If it's taken out of context and used in the flower border, people are going to look at it and question it, and they're going to say, "Is that ragwort?"
Yes.
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. I think it has this sort of structure that in amongst softer grasses or really airy plants, this would kind of float, and it would hide the leaves can be a bit unsightly, but there's not many of them. So I think it has quite good, for me, border appeal. I mean, like any wildflower, it can be quite vigorous. So you might just have to watch the number of seeds and things. But as we're learning with Agapanthus, even they do that.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think it's just about smart gardening. But yeah, it's a wonderful plant. you have to control it if you're near livestock, but actually most people who live in cities and towns, there's no problem with growing it in our old London garden. We could have grown this, and I think if I were to rewind,
one of the things about ragwort, it was spread by the railways, rushing along and dragging seed with them. That's spread across the country.
Yeah,
interesting, I think, to know that.
Yeah, and it's one of our local wildflowers. It's not like Japanese knotweed that's been introduced and is running rampant. It's a genuinely good, friendly plant. Worth being aware of the risks with livestock, but not as big as people realise. And it's not illegal to grow if you're away from. It's totally fine to grow it as any wildflower if you're away from livestock and things. If you get a warning from the local farmer, if yours has gone out of control.
And it's so satisfying if you get all the cinema moths and you walk past and all those beautiful black and red moths sort of start flitting around.
It's like Alice in Wonderland when you see the black and yellow caterpillars which turn into black and red moths. It's almost the caterpillars are unbelievable en masse, and it's kind of whether it's beautiful or not, I don't know. It's like a scene from a Tim Burton film. Amazing that they're so brightly coloured like that. So, but they're unmistakable.
I think the word is surreal, isn't it?
Surreal. Yeah. Yes.
Well, that was a good controversial one to start us off with on your weedy forays.
Yeah, controversial, but it shouldn't be really. I think it's not that controversial.
I'm sure we'll get some comments. Please do comment below.
Yeah. Right, I'll zip through these. So this is another wild. I've got two wildflowers here actually. Let's get the wildflowers section out of the way. Oxeye daisy, Leucanthemum vulgare, and regular common hogweed, which is just both of these I love. So we've got the oxeye daisy is just self-seeded around my garden. I've left some very vigorous, so you have to keep it under control, but actually keeps flowering all summer long, easy plant. You can just rip out what you don't need. And I think it looks really lovely as a big daisy. And hogweed I'm getting interested in just because I think it's a lovely umbel in the middle of summer. Loved by insects, and it comes in. You can either get a pure white, or sometimes it has a slightly pinky tinge inside. But I'm growing it in the woodland area. The only thing I found is that the deer really love the flowers. I keep finding these stems which have just been dead-headed by the deer. So I'm trying to grow this around our fire pit, sort of woodlandy wild area, and let it self-seed. And there are lots of them, but it's just leaves at the moment. So that's the only downside. But they can be really big as well. So I like this kind of dramatic.
Well, there's a great fashion for umbels of any kind at the moment, I think, and there's some great umbels that actually flower really rather late. And if you drive through the heathland on the Norfolk and Suffolk borders, the borders of Norfolk going into Suffolk, there's a wonderful, I don't know the name of it, but it's like a giant cow parsley on speed or something, but very, very fine leaf and a large candelabrum of these little white. They're not so big as hogweed, of course, but I mean, it's just a fantastic plant. I've looked at it for years and wondered, I haven't done anything about it, but it's obviously a wildflower in the right places. But I suppose Breckland, sort of sandy soil, that's the place that it really likes. It might be worth stopping the car and getting a handful of seed.
It might be worth doing that. Just see what it is. That's what I do with a lot of stuff. Is just I'll go around and just keep an eye on the. So with foxgloves, I just keep an eye on the white foxgloves around, and when they've set seed, I'll go and collect seeds from them. Because I think in the wild you're not supposed to dig up plants, but collecting seed is so easy. You just scatter it where you want.
Exactly. Yeah.
Easy way of growing new plants. So,
yeah.
So do that, and if they run wild and destroy your garden, it's not my fault.
It's quite good being known as a sort of wild weed lover, because surely everybody sort of knows that if they introduce something, it could be completely rampant.
Yes, it could be. I think yes, exactly. It's a risky game to play because you don't really know what's going to happen, and plants can behave differently in different areas. But it's no different to any other flower. Really, it's just about learning how they grow, and if you know how to, if they send out rhizomes and shoots, then you know to control that and to watch out for them. If you know that they self-sow prolifically, you know to deadhead some just to make sure they don't do that, or grow them around tougher stuff and things like that. I had one last. So do tell me to shut up.
No, we won't. We refuse.
One last wildflowery weed, which is bushvetch.
Yeah.
And this is I think it's a beautiful. if it wasn't so rampant, I think more people would grow it. It really is a rampant plant. But I noticed the other week we've got Geranium I don't know how to pronounce it. Oxonianum. One of the Oxonianum. That's it. Thank you. We've got this big patch of Geranium Oxonianum, which is in itself a rampant plant, and then this was growing through it and over it, creating this kind of haze over the top.
Yeah,
and the two plants felt evenly matched in terms.
We have that in our wildflower meadow.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah. So I think that's just lovely.
It is.
It's such a beautiful colour. If you're driving along and you see that getting rampant in the verge, all these wonderful flashes of that lovely, vibrant purpley blue, it's lovely.
Who was getting rampant in the verge?
You very much got the vibe of talking dirty, Jack.
It'll be Alan getting seeds.
I'll watch out extra hard when I'm driving along in Norfolk next.
Who knew what was going on in Norfolk?
It's because it's out of the way, you know, we don't have that much to do, so getting rampant in the verge is a good option.
Yeah, it's drier as well. So,
yeah. So that was a lovely wildish section. Where next with your show and tell?
Okay, well, I'll finish off with a few ornamental things I picked up this week from Dove Cottage Nursery in Halifax, which is close to us, which is good. But I'm growing lots of Thalictrums, and this is Splendide white, I think. Yep, Splendide white. I'm growing different kinds of white Thalictrums because I think they're just lovely, airy plants.
You mentioned a lot of white, Jack.
I was just about to say that.
Have you spotted the theme?
Yeah.
I have mentioned a lot of white, haven't I? There's yes, you're the first people who might have spotted that.
And I think I'm thinking to myself that you're sort of enjoying your garden in the twilight. Never mind about talking about us getting rampant in the verges. I mean, I hate to think what's happening in your garden in the twilight.
Alan, you've hit a nail on the head. Twilight is when I'm getting rampant out there. But I'll be but I'm quite often, unfortunately, looking at moths and other things like that. So, but yes.
But you know, being sensible for a moment, the White Garden at Sissinghurst, probably the most famous piece of white garden in the country. I mean, that was designed to be walked through and the gloaming, and that is how to use a white garden. So to everybody that goes out to work, think white. It'll be all white on the night, you know.
I'm hoping. It's a shame, isn't it? It's Sissinghurst. You see the white garden, but it's always, whenever I've seen it, it's been in the blaring midday sunshine, and it's like, I wish I could be there. Can they do a late night? Maybe they do a late night opening.
I think they do the occasional evening thing now. Yeah, which is so sensible because I mean they've got this wonderful theatre there to do it with and to look at it and to say, you know, you can imagine all these ladies who love saying, "Oh, darling, we ought to have some of those."
They'll be happy with that garden, not the wild.
So yes, I assume all of these lovely white plants are then in the end of your busy day, you can sit there and enjoy them looking ethereal and magical at twilight.
Hopefully that's the idea. It's kind of, it's not looking ethereal yet, but you never know. Maybe in a few years' time we'll hit that. But it's there's definitely a white theme. It's not all white. It's not all white, but it's, I think from my old garden, it's known for being pink and purple. But actually, in lots of my designs, I use a lot of white flowers, and so this is where it's all kind of is coming from there, perhaps. But it just felt right. It felt right for this garden when we got here. Just the space and everything. It kind of because the garden's on a slope and you're looking out at the sky mostly. The sky is very dominant, and so kind of. You can't even compete with it really, with the views and the skies. It's kind of this trying to reflect some of the colours and things from that. It's sort of a loose idea at the moment.
Lovely. Tell you're a designer.
Or an overthinker.
I'm wishing I'd kept hold of the white Mecanopsis because I could have sent it your way. A, loving the white, and B, the perfect climate to grow it. If only it was still alive.
Yeah. If it comes back, get some seeds. I didn't know you could get white Mecanopsis, so that's interesting. I'll have to look that up.
Yeah. So a lovely white Thalictrum Splendide. And what else did you get from Dove Cottage? I bet this was a fun trip.
It Yeah, you know when you go in for one plant and you come out with half a carload.
No.
Like, will this one fit in the footwell? Can I squeeze this one next to the passenger? Yes, we've all been there.
So this is a Helenium Waltraut, which I've grown before lots of times. My pronunciation there was completely wrong, but I just love it. Waltraut. So this is Helenium Waltraut.
Alan just says it with absolute conviction and confidence. That's his trick.
Are you making it up, Alan? So this, I'm big. I love Heleniums. Heleniums. I'm actually going to be on the RHS Trialphanum up here in Bridgewater, which is going to be exciting. But I love the ones where they're kind of this dusky, burnt umbry. So I'm excited about these. I grew them down in London. They some of them did well on my allotment. I had sandy, dry soil. Some of them did well there, but many of them struggled a bit because it's a bit too dry.
Yeah.
And we'll see how they do here in this garden. It's not going in the main garden. It's going in another sort of brighter corner somewhere where I kind of there is no theme. It's just everything brightly coloured.
Wow.
So I've got a few varieties of these on the go, but that's one of them. I'm looking forward to seeing how they grow.
There is no theme, just everything brightly coloured sounds like the motto for my life and my garden.
Good. Everyone should have a bit of that.
Arguably, I have too much. The dungarees say a lot. What next from Dove Cottage then?
So I've got the last one from it. This is a bit scrappy. This is one that so Alan will reckon. So when I came to East Ruston, I bought a diorama and I planted it on my allotment in London. And it was the most beautiful, spectacular thing. And unfortunately, I had to leave it there. And I was so gutted because my allotment in London had lots of onion white rot.
Yeah.
And so I'd been saving. I had hundreds of plants on there. I had to leave them all because I just didn't want to bring this thing with me to Yorkshire, the disease. So I've been missing my diorama. So I bought a new one from Dove Cottage. Next time I come to see you, Alan, I'll make sure I get some of yours as well. Lots of things stuck in the mind, but I know there's one point where you walk out and there's a series of steps leading to another part of the garden full of diorama.
Yeah. Exactly.
And it's just beautiful. I love it because it looks like a grass, an evergreen grass, but then you have flowers as well. So it's a bit scrappy here, but
it's interesting because our dioramas over the years have hybridized one between another. And the interesting thing is you get a much longer flowering season because they're seed grown, they're genetically different from their parents, and they take on one trait or another trait, whatever. So if mother flowers early, then son probably flowers early, and if father flowers late, daughter probably flowers late. If you see what I mean. So and you get colour variation as well. There's one group in the Sunk Garden that was a group of self-sown seedlings, and they all flowered quite early, and by the end of middle of July they're finished. And then in another part there's one that's looking absolutely fabulous now. We'll go on for about another 2 or 3 weeks, I suppose.
Yeah,
it is interesting the way plants differ,
and the way that you've noticed that as well is very you can't. It's so special, isn't it, to be able to, you've lived with those plants and you've seen them closely, how they're different, spotting those tiny differences.
Yes.
Not many people would do that, but it's so important to horticulture and gardening, that kind of knowledge. But amazing.
It's also like my Dahlia from seed. I mean, there is no science behind it whatsoever, Jack, but I pick a parent that I like the look of for one reason, whether it be dark foliage or whether it be the colour of the flower, whatever. And we do probably 30 seedlings from that and just grow them on pots until they flower, and then we decide whether they're worthwhile or not.
Yeah.
And when I'm pricking seedlings out from a bunch of Dahlia seed, I look at the foliage very, very carefully. And I mean, I've got some coming along now with very dark foliage, but it's exceedingly ferny and very delicate looking. And it's almost worth growing for that alone, but I just want to see what the flower colour is.
Yes.
Who knows? My first Dahlia, which was a seedling from a Dahlia called Magenta Star. Do you know that one?
Yes, I know. Yeah.
Yeah, dark foliage, bright coloured flower. My first seedling from her bloomed 3 weeks ago, and it opened white and faded to pale pink. How different is that? But it still has dark foliage. They're all singles because, I mean, I think to get the complicated doubles, you have to be very careful about crossing a variety with another one, and so on and so forth. I'm not into that. It's too scientific for me. But to get a garden-worthy plant, there's one in particular that I grow in the garden here, which is now taller than me. It's bone hardy. It's been in for 5-6 years. Dark foliage, and it's single flowers, but the petals are actually, I suppose they're probably pale pink with darker pink stripes on them. That's the best way of describing it. But I mean, it is just a nice thing. And the other thing I think that's interesting is you would go for this. I know you would, because I had a friend of mine who's a nurseryman. He came around the garden and he said, "What is that?" 100 yards away. "What is that?" And it is something a bit special. Yeah. Much like your show and tell, I must say. Thank you very much for that. It's absolutely
thank you very much. Your dahlias sound wonderful. I should have. I am growing some dahlias. I used to grow lots more. But I still love them, and I think there'll be more of them here. But it's lovely to hear how you're basically breeding them, but in an easy way, I guess. Way anyone can do, but you have to spend the time and have the eye for it. But then you get something special that's unique to your garden, and it feels like that's a gift that we as gardeners, any gardener, any person can have. But we've lost it in a way. People feel like it's too complicated.
It's just having the ability, I think, to look and to see what you're actually looking at.
Yes.
Which dahlias, Jack, are you trying in your new garden then, or have you brought, the varieties you love growing before on your allotment that you're trying in Hebden Bridge?
So I've got Dahlia merckii, the species, which I was given seeds of that by garden designer Penny Hobhouse. It's kind of a special one. So I grew them in London. I kept the seeds, and funnily enough, they've proven to be completely perennial up here. They've come back really vigorous, which amazed me. I've got a new. I haven't got many. There's one. I've forgotten the name of it, but it's kind of like a dark. It will come to me later. It's sort of almost like a Helenium color, burnt orangey color, and it's a single. It's got dark foliage. I'd like to try and find one which is this kind of like a peak. Sort of a dark orange with a bit of peachy color to it. So kind of like a sunsetty color. And I'd like to find out one of those with greener foliage, really, but it's got this sort of half green, half bronzy foliage. That's a lovely one. I like the singles because you get it's good for insects as well. And there's one on the allotment which is I don't know what it is, which is just a very heavily doubled white flowered one, which is really nice. And that's just been there on the allotment since before we moved in. I call it the allotment. There's a space on our land which is a vegetable patch, which is called the allotment, with cut flowers and things. So that's all the dahlias at the moment. I think I will add to it, but it's so I've just got the 3 at the moment.
Well, I think you will be adding to it. I mean, just or don't look at any of the Dahlia catalogues or Halls of Hebden or anything like that. If you don't allow yourself to look, maybe you'll manage to resist. But if you do look, I'm assuming you'll end up with lots.
Until somebody posts the most amazing dahlia on Instagram and Jack looks at it and thinks, "Wow, I must have that."
Yeah, there's no hiding from them.
It's too hard. Like they kind of you look at them and you're like, "That's amazing." Oh, and that one's amazing. Maybe that one's a bit different, and that one, and then you end up with 20. And it's like, how does this happen?
But at least you've got some space now. I'm still dealing with a tiny suburban garden where I really don't have space. But never mind. One day. I think you make the most of it. You've got all this room. Just grow all the dahlias.
Yes, have a dahlia field.
Yeah, just grow everything.
Oh, everything. Your show and tell has been absolutely wonderful, Jack. It's exactly what we wanted from you. A lovely mix and lots of little wild things shouting about those wild
and a bit of controversy. We love them.
And some controversy as well.
For
Flomo, maybe you've given people Flomo for things like ragwort, surely for weld and lots of the other lovely things. Maybe there'll be people thinking I should add oxeye daisies back into the garden because they are wonderful and such happy, easy flowers. Flomo, by the way, if people don't know about it, it's that fear of missing out you get about a flower or a plant. It's how I live my life. I think even with 32 acres, it's how Alan lives his life at East Ruston Old Vicarage. And I have chosen my Flomo today, especially for you, Jack, because it is a wildflower. And it's one I have always loved. And ages ago, I remember you writing about how you wanted it to transfer from your border to your lawn. And it's self-heal, Prunella vulgaris, I think it's called. And the idea I have always loved when you go to someone's garden, one of these lovely old established houses where they'll have all of this purple through the grass, sort of creeping around the base of a tree or something. And I've always dreamed of that. And the other half's very small patch of lawn is sacrosanct here, so there won't be any Prunella making its way into his lawn. But next garden, I 100% want a wild area where I can let all the self-heal do its thing through the grass. And yeah, you're obviously enthused about it as well.
I am very enthused about it. I've just noticed we have one next in the border, and it has now finally crept into the lawn.
It's happening.
This is happening, people. But I saw it. It's my brother's got this lovely lawn. It's beautifully kept, but it's absolutely full of self-heal as well. And from a distance, you wouldn't know, but when you get up close, it's just got this lovely purple colour to it. It worked so well there. It just fueled. I'd written about it before, and I wanted it in the lawn, but it just fueled it. I was like, this, you know what? This I've written about it, imagining it, but I've seen it here en masse, and it works really well. I've seen it in small patches elsewhere, but en masse, it just looks amazing with daisies as well. So yes, please do. I encourage you to get some self-heal in your lawn.
Absolutely wonderful plant. Where are you at with your Flomo then, Jack?
So my Flomo is with a plant I used to grow in London, which there's no way we could grow up here in Yorkshire, which is it's the silver tree called Leucadendron argenteum, an amazing plant from South Africa. It's a small tree with the most literally silver-like leaves I've ever seen. And these they grow up in, it looks like, I don't know, it looks like a monster from Monsters Inc. or Sesame Street.
Looks like a monster's curly wig.
It does. It would make a fabulous wig up here. But it's just, when you see it, it shines. It's like, I've never seen anything like it. So these leaves are kind of long spears, which are slightly hairy, but the actual leaf it takes glaucus to another level. It's much more silver than glaucus, but it wouldn't survive. It grows really well in Cornwall. But up here it's just too cold and wet. It needs that little bit of a warmer climate, like down in Cornwall, where even some years they get killed down there, but they generally survive enough. So I've got massive Flomo for that. We had one in our Clapham garden, which sadly didn't survive when I planted it out. I think the soil wasn't acidic enough, but in a pot it grew really well in an acacious compost. I would love to have had a small garden with that tree in it. Absolutely amazing plant.
Well, I think that's a plant to watch, because if our summers are getting drier and drier, that Leucadendron is going to be a star plant for us.
Absolutely. And if I'm growing a Leucadendron in Yorkshire and I'm happy about it, the world is ending. Well, I'll be happy about it. But I think down where you are, certainly it's worth, Norfolk is probably worth trying.
Yeah, particularly on the coast. Yeah. Right then, Alan, what's your Flomo this week?
Well, it really rather relates to the subject that we touched on, and that is the kind of plants that we're growing outside in our gardens that are drought resistant. And my theory is that, I may be wrong, but I hope I'm not, is that with drier climates comes the idea of growing figs as freestanding plants. Now, I've tried at the back of an area. I've got, I think, 4 or 5 figs that I had in pots, and I really didn't know what to do with them. And I planted them outside, and they don't have any water. They have a lot of competition from grass around their roots and everything else. So they're going to have to dive down for anything that they're going to get. And I just thought the other day, well, we shouldn't be worried about some of these figs that take up valuable wall space. Let's face it. And Philip Oostenbrink the other day talked about a fig called Jolly Tiger, which is very bright yellow variegated leaves and variegated fruit. And I thought that's one to get. And there are others, but I just think, figs growing outside, if you've got the space, try a fig as a freestanding plant and just see what happens. I think you might be pleasantly surprised.
Honestly, I can imagine that having freestanding figs would be beautiful and delicious as well.
Yeah, as well. Yeah, exactly.
Well, I hope you managed to get Jolly Tiger, and I hope it costs less money for you than it did for Philip and Matt Pottage. It cost so much they had to share the plant.
I'm going to think. I know Philip, and I as soon as you mentioned his name and fig, I knew it was going to be variegated.
Yeah, and a very beautiful variegation at that. Jack, will you please come back another time, because it has been so much fun.
Oh, you'll have to stop me. I'd love to come. This has been amazing chatting to you both. And I love this conversation around the changing climate and what that means. We really do live in this time where we can experiment, and those experiments are actually really important. So like the figures and thinking about crops is important. But yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's been amazing.
You've been a delight.
Thank
you very much, JJ. It's been wonderful.
JJ, you got a new name, especially for talking dirty. Until next time, everybody. Happy gardening.
Happy gardening. Bye-bye. Jack, I'll let you into a secret. She wants you to mess up, so she's got plenty of stuff.
I want bloopers. So the more mistakes, the merrier.
Shall I just like make some up? Like,
Excuse me.
Oh, here goes Alan. First blooper.
Hello. Right, I'm here. Sorry.
Well, you're back. That's all right. I was loving listening to one half of the phone call.
That was perfect. I felt like when you at school when you hadn't done your homework. That's how I felt when you talked about phloema. I'd forgotten, so while you were talking, I was quickly jotting down my phloema.
So we've done edibles. What's your first ornamental then?
Okay, how many do you want me to go through? Because I've probably got too many here.
Oh, loads. We'll make it a two-parter, Jack. It's fine.
Okay. Well, I'll start off with if I can get this out. It's quite floral. But anyway, I was going to say something else, but I won't go there, even for talking to me. Maybe that is where I get this thing from. But this is a ragwort.
They were bitching, Jack. Come on, say it.
Yeah, they were having a right old bitch.